In this video, I'm going to solve a problem that teaches us how to calculate interest saving on refinancing mortgage. And here is our example. And in this example, you borrowed a mortgage of $450,000 3 years ago with an APR of 4.15% payable with equal monthly payment at the end of each month after the loan was issued. Let us assume that the interest rate has gone down and you can refinance the mortgage at 2.8% APR with similar terms and conditions, and there's no additional cost associated with this refinance. But I will explain later in the video how to address the additional cost part. But for now, let's assume that there's no cost associated with this refinancing, right? So given all these information, I'm asking you the interest saving in three parts. Number one, pretty straightforward. How much would you save on the total interest paid over the life of this loan, ignoring the implication of tax and time value of money? So this is most straightforward. The second part asks you to compute the total interest saving in today's dollar amount, in the sense that the second part considers the time value of money and asks you to compute the total interest saving in today's dollar amount. That's our part 2. And part 3 considers the implication of tax and asks you to compute what is the total interest saving in today's dollar amount using after tax cost of mortgage, which means usually the interest you pay on your mortgage is tax deductible. So there is some implication of tax on the interest saving. So if you consider that part, how much total interest would you save in refinance this mortgage? This is the overall problem, and I'm going to do this problem in Excel without using any complex formulas. So let's go to our Excel. So here I have the Excel file with pre-filled information. I have original mortgage, old APR, loan term, number of payments per year, and time elapsed since original mortgage, which is 3 years, and new APR. So given this information, I would like to answer the first part of our question. The first part of the question asks us to find out how much interest would you save if you refinance, right? So this is a plain and simple, straightforward. So to answer that question, you need to know what is the remaining balance, because once you know the remaining balance, you can easily compute how much total interest would you pay on the remaining balance with the existing APR, and you can also find out the total interest payment on the remaining balance with the new APR. And once you find out how much interest would you pay for old and new APR, you can easily find the difference between these two, and that would give us the total saving on the interest, right? So therefore, the key for us to answer the first part of the question is to find out the remaining balance. How are you going to find the remaining balance? So as you know, in your mortgage payment, part of your payment goes towards your interest payment, and part of your payment goes to principal payment, right? The interest payment is mostly the interest on your existing loan, and the principal payment goes and reduces your balance. So in order to find out the remaining balance, what you have to do is you have to find out how much principal did you pay in the past 36 months. That's our first goal. Once we find out how much principal you paid in the past 36 months, you can easily calculate the remaining balance. And there are different ways to compute the total principal payment in 36 months, but I'm going to use Excel's CUMPRINC function. That help us to compute the cumulative principal payment. You can simply do here equal and cumulative principal function, but I'm going to use the visual here so it's easy to understand. I go here on formulas, and here is a financials, and you can see here CUMPRINC, and that if you don't know what this function does, you can look at the explanation, and that gives us. And now we have all the information here, and we can input that information and then calculate how much cumulative principal you would pay in the past 36 36 months. Let's compute here. Rate is 4.15, but remember that's an annual, so we need to divide this by 12. Okay, and then number of payment, you can simply say here 30 into 12, or you can also say here B4 times B5, because each cell has 30 and 12. That gives us the total number of payment, and here's the principal. Principal basically means your loan amount, and for our case is 450,000, right? And here's a starting and end period, meaning you want to calculate cumulative principal payment from which period to which period. And for our case, we want to calculate from period 1 to 36. Therefore, we just need to do here 1 and 36. So that means we are computing principal payment in the first 36 months. And there's one more argument here, right here. It can be either 0 or 1. 0 means the payments are at the end of the period. 1 means beginning of the period. I'm gonna just put here 0 because we are assuming that all payments are at the end of the period, right? So once you do that, that gives you the total principal payment in the past 36 months. Look at here, which is 24,154.47. So once you know the principal payment in the past 36 months, you can easily compute the remaining balance. Would be simply the loan amount minus whatever you have paid in the past 36 months. This is already in negative numbers, so I'm going to simply do plus, so that means it gives me the remaining balance. So that means now after 3 years, you still have 425,845.527. That's the remaining balance. Now, what we are going to do is we are going to compute total interest payment on the remaining balance for the remaining 27 years. Okay, and using this APR, new and old. And once you find that, we can find the difference, and that gives us the interest saving. Again, to find the total interest payment, Excel has a cumulative interest payment function which we are going to use. That makes this problem much easier. Okay, so again, you can use this equals to CUM-IPMT, but I'm going to use the visual that's easier to understand. Go to formula, and here's a financials, right? And then here's a CUM-IPMT, which means this returns the cumulative interest payment between two periods. Look at here, like earlier, rate. This time, what I'm going to do, first, how much interest would I pay on the remaining balance for my old APR, right? So the rate is going to be old, is a 4.15%, right? That has to be divided by 12. And number of period, and that's the part I think we all should know. It's a 30 years mortgage, but 3 years has already gone. So what you can see is simply 27, the remaining number of years, times 12, right? So that gives us the total number of periods for the remaining balance, right? And then the PV, which is the present value, which is the remaining loan amount. And for our case, this guy here, B8. And starting period, the starting period, we are going to assume now it's a new, right? So you can simply, because we use that total number of period is 27 times 12, so it's going to be all the remaining period, which is starting period is now until the end, which is 27 times 12. So that gives me the total interest payment using my old APR, right? Again, there's one more argument here, which is 0. All right, so that gives me the total interest payment using my old APR. Okay, so that's a negative. If you want to make it positive, you can do that, because if you have a ABS here, that makes this positive, right? So that it's easy to find the difference. That means on the existing loan, if you did not refinance, the total interest payment would be 282,893.1176. Okay, that's using old APR. So now let's compute the total interest payment using new APR, right? You can now go to formula again and financials, and then CUM-IPMT right here, right? And then rate. This time it's going to be new. APR, which is 2.8% over 12. And the number of payment, remaining 27 years, so I'm going to do 27 times 12. And then the present value, that is the remaining balance, which is this guy here, B8. And now starting period. Starting period is the entire life of the loan, right? So therefore, starting going to be 1, and end period is going to be total number of years, that is 27 times 12, right? So that is the starting and end period. And there's one more argument, which is 0, right? The payment is at the end of the period. So that gives me total interest payment. Again, this is also negative, so I want to make this positive so that it's easier to interpret that number. Okay, so here's an ABS that just makes that negative positive. Here's the interest payment. So if you refinance the remaining mortgage using new APR, the total interest you would pay would be 181,534.8326. That is the total interest payment if you refinance. So how much are you going to save? Simply the difference in these two interest payment, that is 101,356.258. So this is how you can calculate the total interest saving if you refinance the mortgage. So this is the first part of our question. Now we want to go and do second part and third part. In the second and third part of this question, it asks us to find out the present value of interest saving. So in order to compute that, what I need here is I need the monthly interest payment for remaining balance using that old APR and new APR. And I'm going to calculate these monthly payment in column D and E. Once I have this monthly interest payment, I can find the present value of this future interest payment and find the difference, and that difference is going to be the present value of your interest saving. So let's create the monthly interest payment for these APR. Okay, so remember the remaining time period for this loan is 27 times 12 is going to be 324. So we have to create the payments for this 324 periods. So I'm going to start with 1 here, then 2, and then 3, and then you can simply select it and then grab and drag it down until it is 324. Okay, so 324. Okay, that's for our monthly payment here. That's good. And now we need to calculate monthly payment using old APR and new APR for the remaining balance. So you can simply do equals to IPMT, but I'm going to use this visuals as I did earlier. Here's the financials, and then here IPMT function. Okay, IPMT, and here rate. So for us, this is for old APR. It's gonna be, you can also do B3, but I'm going to simply say here is a 4.15% over 12 because the monthly payment, right? And then period, and that should be C1, and we want to compute interest payment for all the periods. So I don't want to put that number. I want to link that to cell. Okay, number of period, as you know, this is 27 year times 12, which is 324. You can simply do that. And then the present value. Present value is the loan amount, which means the remaining balance. For our case, it's a 425,845.527, right? That's our loan amount. And future value, how much is that going to be? Usually at the end of your mortgage, you pay off all your loans, so it's going to be 0. And then you can leave the last part type, but I am just going to put 0, 0, 1, right? So once you click that, okay, and that gives you the monthly interest payment for old APR. Since this is negative, maybe making it positive will be easier to interpret the number. So I'm going to do this ABS, absolute value, which means it will give me the positive value. Okay, that is for my I payment using old APR, and you can double click on the square box, and this calculates me the monthly interest payment for that loan for the next 324 months, right? Likewise, I can also calculate IPMT for new APR. Again, I go here, formula, financials, and then here's a IPMT, and this time the rate is the new one, which is 2.8%, okay, over 12. And period, like earlier, you have to do this C1 because we want to compute this I payment for the remaining period. I want to link that to cell so that I can track the formula. Number of payment, like period, is 324, 27 times 12, right? Present value again, this loan amount, 425, 845.527, right? That's our loan amount for the remaining balance, and future value again is going to be 0, and type, you can leave this blank, or I'm going to just 0 here just for the consistency purpose. Okay, once I do that, this is my monthly interest payment for this new APR. And again, I'm going to put this ABS sign so that I get the positive number right here. Okay, so then this, after that, I can double click on the square box. Boom, done. So now I have my monthly payment, interest payment for this both APR. Now I can calculate the present value of each monthly interest payment. And Excel has a nice function called NPV, and we can use that NPV function to compute the present value. So equals to NPV and now rate. And this is NPV for my interest payment for old APR. So I'm going to use this rate 4.15. Remember, these all the interest payment are monthly, so that has to be divided by 12, comma, and now you need all the cash flow for your NPV. And actually NPV has these two arguments. One is the rate and then all the cash flow. I'm going to click on this D1. You can drag it down, or you can simply Control Shift down arrow. That just helps me to select all the cash flow, right? And then close the bracket, enter. Okay, that is my present value of all the future interest payment if I did not refinance. That is for old APR, right? For likewise, you can calculate NPV for new APR, like APR. So it's going to be NPV, and this time rate is going to be 2.8% over 12, right? And comma, and this time the future cash flow is going to be your monthly payment based on new APR. I'm going to select this E1 and Control Shift down arrow, bracket close, enter. Okay, that gives me the present value of monthly interest payment for new APR. So once you have that too, you can simply find the difference, and that difference is going to be the present value of your interest saving, which is, in our case, is 53,996.05. That means if you refinance this mortgage and there's no additional cost, then the present value of that interest saving is approximately 54,000. So now let's answer the third part. In the third part of the question, it asks us to find out the present value of this interest saving using after-tax mortgage rate. Okay, so how do you find the after-tax mortgage rate? Okay, I have a video if you want to understand it better, but let's assume that the tax rate is 20%, right? So this 20%. So how do you calculate after-tax APR? Okay, usually the after-tax is always equals to here bracket 1 minus your tax rate, okay, times the APR. So after-tax old APR is going to be 1 minus tax rate times 4.15%. That is the after-tax old APR. Likewise, we can calculate after-tax new APR. This is also going to be 1 minus 20%, which is this guy right here, and times your 2.8%. So that is the after-tax APR. Now you can calculate NPV of these future interest payment using these after-tax APR, and the difference that you get at the end is the present value of your interest saving after considering the tax implication. Okay, so that's why let's do it. Let's compute NPV, and I have already done that. Here's equals to NPV, and this is for my old APR, so it's 3.32 right here, and so divided by 12 and comma, and your interest payment like D1, Control Shift down arrow, bracket close, enter, right? That gives me the present value. Likewise, you can also do NPV, and then this is a new one, right? So this is a 2.24 right here over 12 comma, and this time interest payment is going to be for this number from the column E, and Control Shift and down arrow and bracket close, okay, enter. So that gives me the total present value using after tax rate. So if you find the difference in between these two numbers, that is the present value of your interest saving. So if you really consider the impact of both the time value and the tax, then the real saving for your mortgage would be 60,967.98. okay, that is how you calculate how much is the interest saving if you refinance the mortgage. And here comes, okay, whether you should refinance or not, right? So there are many terms and conditions you should consider, but one of the factor is every time when you have to refinance, there is the refinance cost or the loan closing costs in the prior institution, and you might get a new loan cost, whatever may be, right? So there's a loan cost. I'm going to say this is loan cost, that maybe you're closing your existing loan or getting a new loan or whatever, and you have to take some time off from your working, whatever cost is, right? So you have to look at that cost. What is the total cost of your refinancing additional cost? And it could be anything, 10,000, or it could be 15,000, 20,000, whatever it may be. So how you should consider is you have to look at the cost, and I'm assuming right now it's just the 12,000, okay? So I'm assuming here 12,000 is the cost of my refinance. So should I refinance or not? I have to look at, okay, in the today's value term, without looking at the tax, I can save here approximately 54,000, and the cost is 12,000, right? So the net saving is obviously your total present value of your saving minus the cost. So you still save approximately 52,000, right? So how you decide whether to refinance or not, this is how exactly you should do. You should look at the total present value of your interest saving, and then you have to look at the cost, right? And you have to look at the difference. As long as the present value of your refinance is more than the cost that incurs by refinancing, then I think that's a good deal. All right, that's all. I think it's a long one, but I hope you guys will like it. Thank you.